Hello, everyone, and welcome to Epic Charismatic. And today we're going to be doing a tier list of Lana Del Rey's studio albums. This will not include any Lizzie Grant albums, and it's definitely not including her unreleased songs. It'll also not include the Paradise edition of Born to Die. These are just her studio albums, original concepts, nothing that's building off of anything else. And I'm going to go in chronological order. So let's all start with Born to Die. Born to Die, this is the album that started it all. This is the album that gave us the world of Lana, and it has a very happy, lighthearted mood. She has some high-pitched vocals, some lower-pitched vocals. She uses a lot of strings, makes the song sound very elegant, but she also uses modern production that makes the music actually listenable for modern day listeners. She likes to reference old Hollywood. We notice this especially in the Paradise edition, which I know I said we're not going to rank that, but she nevertheless starts her Hollywood references in Born to Die, specifically in the track Blue Jeans, talking about James Dean. And in the music video for National Anthem, when she reenacts the entire JFK Marilyn Monroe situation, as well as playing Jackie Kennedy. I guess I should give the rankings. Definitely an S tier album. So some highlights of the album. The title track, I think, is a very beautiful piece. So it starts out with these dramatic strings, and then it goes into a beat, modern day sounding hip hop beat. I just really like the way that she displays the fact that life is so fleeting and so short, and it doesn't make sense to spend it sad, even though she sounds very sad on the track. She's saying, listen, I'm not trying to be sad for my whole life. I want to be happy, Why? Because we're born to die. I love this title track. This is her best title track, in my opinion. And this theme of starting the song with strings and then going into a hip hop beat is a general theme. I think that, or it's more like a consistent sound that she has throughout this album, and I really like that because it makes this album very coherent, and I like a sense of consistency within an album. So I also want to mention Off to the Races. This song is one of her few songs that are a little faster paced, more upbeat sounding, and I think it's really impressive the way she uses her vocals for very high and low pitches. I think that's very fun to listen to and also impressive. That's a song where she sings pretty quickly and at a high-pitched voice, but then throughout the verses she's singing in such a low, deep voice that it's like, how can one voice box make such a range of sounds within the same song too? I think it's very impressive. Another thing I want to mention, forgot to mention earlier, but she has this dreamy sort of vibe to her music, to all of her music, and I think especially this album. This is her first studio album as Lana Del Rey, but this is where you get an introduction into that dreamy world that she creates for us. Again, with strings, the way she uses strings dramatically, like in the song Video Games, the way she uses strings in there, it just sounds majestic. It sounds magical. Something else I want to add is in Diet Mountain Dew, that's also another happy sounding, upbeat song. She mentions New York City, and I like to just point out that it's a reference to the time that she spent in New York City when she first was trying to be a singer. And this is a type of reference that she'll make in future albums. So I like the lyrical consistency too that she has throughout her albums. And we get a start of that with this album. She also mentions New York in Carmen by calling herself a Coney Island queen. Solid album. Consistent sound when it comes to her songs. All of her songs sound like they belong on the same album, and yet they don't all sound the same. So I love this album. This is an S tier album for me. It's very nostalgic too because I remember when it was really big. And yeah, this is definitely S tier for me. So, Ultraviolence. When this album came out, I mean, I was ready for a rock influenced album in a time where everything was leaning towards hip hop. And I like hip hop a lot, but at the time I also loved rock and roll and I wanted to hear more guitar and more classic drum beats in modern music, and I wasn't getting that. And she definitely utilizes that in this album. She uses this classic electric guitar in Cruel World, Shades of Cool, Pretty When You Cry, and even in West Coast, which I would say is probably her most popular track on the album. And speaking of West Coast, I gotta just say the tempo change from the verse to the chorus, the way it slows down. I mean, I was saying that Born to Die is a dreamy album, but just that one song, West Coast, in Ultraviolence is, I mean, the definition of dreamy. And then at the end, when she has that synth starting to play, oh, come on. I mean, that's just a song that you play and you just like sit with your headphones and you just vibe. And you just sit there and you imagine, I don't know, you imagine that you're living in some kind of fairy tale. And then, of course, Brooklyn Baby is another New York City reference, and it also sounds pretty dreamy. What I really like about that song is that her lyrics are very illustrative in that song. The way she talks about colors, the way she talks about fire and water, the way she talks about nature. She's really painting a picture with the lyrics in that song, and I really appreciate that. Oh, who can forget about Old Money? So this song actually samples a song from the 60s movie of Romeo and Juliet called What Is a Youth? But man, she takes that song and elevates it production-wise, because I think in the original film, the song is very, very simple, and if you listen to the audio, it even sounds older. You could tell the technology that was used then wasn't as good. But with Old Money, her vocals, you feel the emotion in her voice. You totally feel it. And you feel it in the music too, with the strings and the piano. And it's just a great song to be sad to, which is funny. But like, a lot of times people want to avoid negative emotions. We think that that's a good thing. We think, oh, it's being negative if we express any of our negative emotions. When in reality, it's like, the way that you can ever be able to get over something bad or get over, I guess, the feeling is to process that emotion. So I do think that allowing yourself to feel certain negative emotions is healthy. So I think if you're ever feeling sad and you need to fully process your sadness, I think definitely take a listen to Old Money, because you'll be able to feel sad, but enjoy it. Ultraviolence as an album as a whole, I should say. I mean, just the title track right there. The title of the whole album, Ultraviolence, is a very dark topic, and I think the entire album references some darker themes. She has lyrics about violence, in Ultraviolence, of course, with He Hit Me and It Felt Like a Kiss. And she talks about lust and My Way Up to the Top, and also greed with Money, Power, Glory, and in a sense, My Way Up to the Top too, right? But I like that. I like an album, just one album, as opposed to an artist's entire career where they kind of delve into the more negative side of themselves and express that. I would say that this album, I don't have synesthesia, I think that's pronounced. I don't have that or anything like that, but it's just, I don't know, when I listen to this album, the feeling that it gives me, it just reminds me of the feeling that you get in a thunderstorm, you know? How there's like the chaos of the lightning and thunder. It just reminds me of like the crashing of the drums, and then the sounds of the electric guitar, and then the dark subject matter too. It's like a really cold, stormy night. And finally, I keep forgetting to rank this and then do all my talking. I apologize, but yeah, definitely S tier. I think Ultraviolence possibly could be her magnum opus. I actually debate between two albums being her magnum opus, Ultraviolence, and this next one, Honeymoon. So yes, I'm already gonna put Honeymoon up in S. so you don't have to sit here and wait for me to rank this album. If Ultraviolence is you being amidst a crashing thunderstorm, then Honeymoon is definitely the glistening pavement and grass and leaves of the trees, as well as the sunshine afterwards and the rainbow that you see right after a thunderstorm. I think this album does a good job of balancing more positive and negative themes. So I would say Born to Die is I can't say necessarily that it's a super light album, because she does talk about her sadness in Born to Die. I mean, the song that made her famous on that album is called Summertime Sadness, but Honeymoon has both. It has both elements. It has songs that are happier and songs that are sadder, and songs that are honestly not necessarily happy or sad. For example, Music to Watch Boys To. It's just a chill song. It's not upbeat, but it's not sad by any means. It's a very enjoyable song. I think the best thing about this album is the fade from High by the Beach into Freak into Art Deco. That's a spiritual experience. Honestly, that is a spiritual experience, listening to those three songs and listening to them fade into one another and sound like you're listening to one track the whole time. It's just amazing. But that being said, so for the dark element, because I was saying there's also dark elements in here too, in High by the Beach, specifically in the music video, at the end she talks about being born again, not through love, but through revenge. And so that's definitely something that's a little darker. It's like a callback to Ultraviolence, I think. Kind of embracing a trait that within humanity is usually viewed as taboo. Like you shouldn't even feel proud of having that trait, right? She's something shameful, especially for a woman, right? Culturally speaking. That's where there's kind of more of a darkness in this album. We have Salvatore, which sounds... she even says in the song, "Catch me if you can, working on my tan," right? So even that kind of elicits that sunshine that I was talking about earlier. And also the Burnt Norton interlude into Religion, that fade from, one track to another, is just very satisfying sounding. I like it a lot. Me personally, I would rank Honeymoon as just slightly higher than Ultraviolence. I think it's a better album than Ultraviolence. But if somebody were to tell me Ultraviolence is better, I can't argue too much with it, because I really do love them both a lot. So yeah, I would say Honeymoon is an S tier album. It is an amazing album. So next, Lust for Life. I have to say, Lust for Life, I think, has a lot of great songs, but for me, the album just sounds disorganized. It just sounds like a compilation album of very well-written songs, but it's a compilation album. The genres of the songs, I feel like she has way too much variety. Like she has like a down-to-earth folk kind of song with Tomorrow Never Came, but then she has like a more pop hit with Cherry. Then she has her usual strings with 13 Beaches, and then like the typical hip-hop with Coachella. Essentially, again, I just think the biggest issue is too many songs also. I think this album has 17 tracks, if I'm not mistaken. Well, yeah, I think her songs just don't fit a consistent theme well enough. But that being said, at least the songs are very good. So songs I mentioned earlier that I really love, 13 Beaches, Cherry. Personally, I also really love Tomorrow Never Came. I think that song is very underrated. One thing I do have to give her props for this album is that it truly is her genuinely happy album. The title track is Lust for Life. When you have a lust for life, that means you're a happy person, right? I do like that she has an album that is positive and that's happy. I would say that makes this album the antithesis to Ultraviolence, and that is very interesting to me. Ultimately, it's hard for me to enjoy it too much, again, because of how many songs are on there that just don't all fit with each other. Like, I feel like a lot of the songs, you can almost group them up in pairs. So, like, the first two songs with Love and Lust for Life, those two sound similar enough to be grouped together. And then you have 13 Beaches and Cherry. Those fit. God Bless America and all the beautiful women in it, along with When the World Was at War, I Kept Dancing. I mean, those two songs sound similar to each other, but they don't sound similar to Love and Lust for Life at all. She could have shortened this album just by picking one of each of these pairs of songs that I noticed kind of sound similar to each other. And maybe that would have helped. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more. I'm not sure though, because again, my biggest issue with the album is the lack of a consistent sound and a consistent theme when it comes to the music. So I honestly, I'm struggling between A and B. I'm not totally sure which of these I should pick. If I could rest it between both of these, I would love that. But if I have to pick one, and without including the nostalgia factor, I gotta put it in B. I gotta put it in B tier. I apologize to all of the Lust for Life stans. I don't know. I don't think the songs on this album are unique enough and good enough to justify how disorganized the album is when it comes to the audio. So I'm gonna leave it at B. I'll see if at the end of this video if I change my mind after thinking about these other albums, but if I might end up keeping it at B. I don't know. Now this one is an interesting one to me. Norman and Rockwell. I personally feel like this album is overrated. Don't hate me for this, but it's just, this is an issue that a lot of people have complained about with Lana's earlier albums that I don't hear at all in those albums, but I start to hear it here on this one, which is when people say all her songs sound the same. Definitely when it comes to Born to Die, Ultraviolence, Honeymoon, I don't hear that at all. It's not all sounding the same. Maybe if you're playing it out loud on a speaker where you can't hear the different layers of the instrumentation, it's going to sound the same to you because all you're going to hear is her vocals, the volume on her vocals way up and the volume of the music way down. But if you have headphones on, no. Those songs don't all sound the same, especially not on Lust for Life. I mean, that's the complaint that I have, is that they sound way too different. But on Norman Rockwell, I do start to understand that issue that people have been complaining about. I hear it here. She has way too many skips, in my opinion, on this album. I think too many songs sound similar. And also, when I say that the songs sound the same, I'm talking about how it's all the same with the soft vocals, the slow pace, very stripped back, not too many instruments. I mean, even trying to make everything stripped back and more just focused on the vocals and the lyrics, it works for the songs that it works for, but it doesn't work for every single song. So I think that hope is a dangerous thing for a woman like me to have. I think just having the piano and her vocals and those lyrics work really well, because I think the lyrics to that song specifically are really good, and I think it's really enjoyable enough melody to compensate for the fact that it might sound boring to somebody who's not in the mood to listen to a song like that. So for that song, I think it's okay, but when you have songs like Love Song and The Next Best American Record and Bartender, I'm just like, I don't need these songs here, you know? That being said, I do want to give her credit for Cinnamon Girl, because to me, if I were to talk to somebody about Lana Del Rey and her music, and I were to give her, I would give that person a song of hers to listen to where I'm like, okay, this is a classic Lana song. It's Cinnamon Girl. It's kind of funny. I think it's weird that that song was released so far into her career, and yet the second I heard it back in 2019, I was like, oh, this is a classic Lana song. This is a song that you show someone when you want to introduce them to Lana and you want them to know what she's about. I feel like that's the perfect song for that. My critique with the reason I think this album's overrated real quick, I just think just because there's more lyrics doesn't mean those lyrics are better than the songs on the other albums. I definitely disagree with that. All the other S tier albums have amazing lyrics in those songs. I think Ultraviolence and Honeymoon are just underrated. I don't know why she didn't have popularity back then. I mean, I do remember her having issues with critics back when Born to Die came out, and I think that kind of bled in to the Ultraviolence and Honeymoon albums. But something changed when Norman Rockwell came out, and people started to really like her. And I'm glad for that. And not just that, the critics started to really like her. All of a sudden, she's this genius artist who makes amazing music and has these amazing lyrics. And she does have amazing lyrics, but that's not the album. This is not the album that I would use to showcase her lyricism. I personally think she has better albums than this. But that being said, she does have a lot of really enjoyable songs. Even though I think there's too many skips on the album, she still does have a lot of enjoyable songs with Doing Time, The Greatest, But I Love You, and I personally like Hope is a Dangerous Thing, but I can understand why somebody wouldn't like it because it is very, very simple, right? I mean, even on Lust for Life, we have the song Change, which is just a very simple piano with her vocals. But I do think Hope is a Dangerous Thing for a woman like me to have utilizes those elements better because the lyrics are, in my opinion, way better. Along with the melody, too, like I said. Yeah, so as much as people love this album, I think ultimately it falls a little flat for me because I think you can't really have an album that, okay, so I'll say this. I give her credit that it has a consistent theme, which is the issue I had with Lust for Life. But when you're trying to have a consistent theme, you have to do it in a way where the songs at least have a little variety within them, right? Like Born to Die. She has consistencies when it comes to each song, but there's still enough variety. For example, when she starts a song out with strings and then has a hip hop beat right after, she still has those few songs that she kind of throws in there to keep you on your toes a bit, you know, like the way she has Off to the Races. That's the kind of faster pitched and more upbeat song. And same thing with Diamandu being upbeat, but then having her Video Games and her Blue Jeans that are slower and more on the sadder side. Like she has enough variety in that album, but without sacrificing consistency. So I think even though Norman Rockwell is a consistent album, I think, again, it's too monotonous for me. The songs, most of them sound too similar to each other, and I think it has too many skips. And because of that, I'm going to put it in A tier because I still think, ultimately, I think Norman Rockwell also has a lot of really good songs, the way Lust for Life does, but at least it has a consistent theme. So I'm going to leave it in A, or I'm going to put it in A because of that. Chemtrails Over the Country Club. I gotta say, I do like the title track of this album. I like the lyrics of that title track. It's relatable emotionally, but ultimately I have to say, like, it was very disappointing for me. I feel like it had the exact same sound as Norman Rockwell, and even though I like the title track, the rest of the songs on this album sound the same as each other. They're just too simple. I understand from a business perspective, when something works, you stick with it, but that does not mean copy paste, and that's what it sounds like to me. I'm sorry, but you guys gonna hate me for this, but I gotta put this in F. It's so bad. I'm sorry. Do not. Please just, if you disagree, convince me. Try to convince me. Tell me exactly what to listen to. And explain to me how it's different. Because otherwise, I gotta put this in F. I just have to. And speaking of an F album, Blue Bannisters also belongs in F. Because I was so disappointed by Chemtrails that I didn't even give this a listen. I'm gonna be honest. If it's worth listening to, give me some songs. Maybe I'll redo this video. Maybe. But come on, it's difficult. It's difficult when the songs are all low volume voice, soft vocals, simple piano, simple guitar, and nothing else. It's just, I don't know. I just don't like it personally. But that being said, did you know there's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard? I was pleasantly surprised with this album. Now, even though she has a lot of soft vocals, a lot of piano, what makes this album different is, first of all, her songs that are have heavy piano in them, heavily incorporates piano. Candy Necklace, as well as Paris, Texas. That's rhyme. That's funny. The piano is not simple. I think the piano is very orchestral. It's very theatrical. So Candy Necklace, that sounds very, very theatrical. And it makes sense because John Batiste is involved in that track. And he was trained at Juilliard. So that makes sense, right? But I love the piano in Candy Necklace. I love the whole song. But the piano is it. If as someone who enjoys listening to classical music and enjoys a good piano piece, that is some solid piano playing. And Paris, Texas. So to me, when I first listened to it, it made me think of a French indie film. It sounded like it was straight out of a French indie film. I know a lot of people said that they felt that it sounded like it came from Coraline. I agree with that too. That's not the first movie that popped up in my head. For me, like, I was thinking just, again, a general French indie film. But regardless, both songs very theatrical sounding. Sounds like orchestral music or classical music. And I love that. So she's got me with that. It's like she knew. Like, okay, listen, I need to make epicharismatic, epi-happy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I like that there's more variety when it comes to the genres in this album, but not so much variety as Lust for Life. So, for example, she consistently has some folk sounding songs or songs that kind of are reminiscent of the Beatles, like the first half of A&W, as well as Let the Light In. But then she consistently also uses hip hop sounding beats, like in Peppers, and in the second half of A&W. And again, to kind of prove my point, she literally within A&W has two different genres of music within the same song. So she's already doing that within the same song, let alone within a whole album. I think this album has the opposite. It's not an issue because it's a good thing, but something that I criticized Norman Rockwell about is it having too many songs that sounded like too many skips. I feel like Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard is the opposite. It doesn't have many skips. It has a lot of great songs that I really like, and it's still a consistent, coherent album. So that's also really great. That's what I love to hear. I love that in Peppers it starts out hip hop and then it ends with a kind of surfer, rock and roll sounding music. So again, with her playing with multiple different genres without going overboard with it, I really like that. Yeah, so it's like she has those soft vocals that she's been leaning on for the past few albums, but at least on this album, she plays a bit more with complexity in terms of like the piano playing, and she also plays with genres, just entire genres in general, but without playing with them too much. She kind of mixes and matches them within the album. It's a coherent album. It's lyrically, it's a pretty sad album. She talks about personal struggles that she's had in her life, so I appreciate that. I think this is a great album. I think it's her best album in years, in recent times. So because of that, I'm definitely gonna put it in A tier. So I think I'm happy with this ranking of her albums. I apologize for the two albums that are at the bottom. Well, I don't apologize for Chemtrails because I actually listened to that and I just didn't like it. But I apologize for Blue Banisters because that's not fair. But I was so disappointed after Chemtrails. It's hard to, I don't know, it's hard for me. It was hard for me to even want to listen to Blue Banisters because didn't it came out like a year right after too. So it's like, girl, take some time to make a good album, please. And then she did. The last thing I want to say, I didn't say this when I was ranking these albums because I was ranking individual albums, but these S tier albums up here, I mean, these are the holy trinity of Lana Del Rey albums. I'm serious. Like, I almost want to say that they're all equally good, but to me, Ultraviolence and Honeymoon are better than Born to Die. And to me, even I think Honeymoon is better than Ultraviolence, but you could disagree with that and I wouldn't be mad. So yeah, this is my tier list of Lana Del Rey's albums. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you guys have the same opinion as me, if you have different opinions as me, I would love to hear that in the comments. I would love to read about it. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.